Today is April 19th, 2021. This is the Kubernetes CSI implementation meeting. We're going to go down our usual agenda of release status. Starting with 119, the only thing remaining here is figuring out how to promote the CSI proxy binary from a staging bucket to a release bucket. Looks like Jing was finally able to reach out to a release person on the process for that. And it looks like it's a manual process for now. Basically, an admin is going to need to manually push the binary to the bucket. And so the main thing we need to figure out is the naming structure that we want to follow. And once we follow the naming structure, then we should be able to just push things there as needed. So hopefully we'll be able to make some more progress on that this week. Moving on to 121, let's start with any existing feature work that's still going on, starting with volume snapshots.
So the Go mod is updated. I submitted PR to update the story version. I'm asking Shangqian to take a look to see if I missed anything.
Awesome. And those are the main things that we're waiting on for the release?
Yeah, that is the main thing.
Okay, sounds good. There might also be a PR coming to remove the CRD status field from the generated CRDs.
Why is that?
Right now, the generated CRDs have the status field in it.
Okay, yeah, I forgot. Did we talk about this? Yeah, it sounds familiar, but I don't remember what was the issue.
Yeah.
Okay, so automatically generated now, right? It's kind of, but then what was the problem? It was left there, but we're not using it. What's the problem of this status?
Yeah, it has this status field, and the main problem is for certain operators that reconcile add-ons to a Kubernetes cluster, it does so by taking a diff of the manifest versus what's actually in the API server. And if there's a difference, it's going to apply the manifest. And the problem.
How is this? Okay, so if we remove that, then how is this going to affect the? So because we do have status, right? We do have one status.
Yeah. So this is status of the CRD.
Oh.
This is not the status of the snapshot
resource
object.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So basically, for some reason, the generator generated it with a bunch of empty things.
Okay.
And when you end up comparing this with what's actually in the API server, like obviously, because after you apply a CRD, the API server is going to go and fill in the status with non-empty stuff.
Okay.
And then what happens is in the operator, when you compare the manifest, the desired manifest with what's in the API server, this status ends up showing up as a diff. And so the operator will just forever be trying to reconcile the differences.
Okay.
This feels like a generator issue, right? Like the
the
generator outputs a lot of garbage, and I'm surprised that it's gone on this long without it getting fixed.
Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, so I've asked someone to kind of investigate where this is coming from, and if it's coming from the generator, I don't know, maybe we can somehow fix the generator to just drop the status.
So you want to wait for this one before we release this, or?
No, I guess we don't have to wait.
Okay.
I guess if the issue is in the generator itself, then it might be difficult, or it might take a long time to get it fixed in the generator. Potentially, I don't know, in the short term, we could potentially have like our script that calls the generator just drop status afterwards. I don't, that's also a possibility. But yeah, I wouldn't hold the release on this. It's just a nice to have.
I think that currently there's a README in that directory that says after you run the generator, make the following manual edits.
Yeah, we do have a few things we do have to
So-
make manually. There
so
was no problem in this.
This could just be one more thing in that manual list of edits.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, we can do that before,
possibly, yeah.
figure out how to do
Okay.
this manually. It's yeah, definitely it's not perfect.
Mhm.
We do have to manually change a few things.
But this is a deeper problem.
Okay.
I mean, I was gonna say I have the same problem with my CRDs, having to deal with this stuff. Like if there was a generator that could
Mhm.
just generate the right YAML, that would be nice.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So I guess, yeah, that's fine as a workaround for now. Sounds good. Thank you. All right. Next is populators.
Yeah, I can't remember if I discussed this last week, but I'm going through and updating all the way that stuff gets generated. And I was able to remove all of the dependencies on kates.io/code generator. So now everything is done by controller gen, which is part of KubeBuilder as far as I know. So the upshot of that is that you use the dynamic client to actually talk to things instead of using generated clients, but there's less generated code and it works just as well. So I'm looking at combining that with all of the other code changes from the code reviews and putting those into a PR and merging them. I still have not made
Cool.
progress on Prow or the release tools, but that's the next on my list.
Okay.
Oh, I thought
Awesome. Let us know. Yeah, let
from,
us know if you run into issues with that. So
are you also going to look at if we just use KubeBuilder to do everything, and then that's different from you. Right now, you're still just run the controller gen, right? Not running the
Right. I'm directly invoking controller gen
Uh-huh.
still and
Okay.
have
So what is the
hand-coded.
difference between if let's say if we just use KubeBuilder to do everything, would that be even better? Since we already go this far, I just want to make sure that we, since you are making all these changes anyway, we probably should just just
I'm not at
talk
the
about what's the pros and cons, so that we don't have to go after you do this. Then
Right.
there is some recommendation for you to go and redo this off everything in KubeBuilder. So I just want to make sure that we make that discussion right now.
I'm taking an incremental approach.
Mhm.
Like I want to get farther away from the old way that things are done and closer to the new way things are done. But because I have something that actually works, I want it to continue working at every step along the way.
Okay.
So at this point, my main goal was to get rid of Kates.io code generator because it had all those version issues and we didn't want to deal with that. So the only overlap between Kates.io code generator and KubeBuilder is the generation of the deep copy functions. They're both able to generate those, and the code that's outputted by both looks almost identical. There are some slight differences, but basically there's the same thing. So the CRD definitions were always coming from controller gen, and the static or the generated clients were always coming from code generator. And so the main difference now is I'm not using the generated clients anymore. I'm just using the deep copy functions and the dynamic client and getting that to work. As far as like using the rest of KubeBuilder to generate more stuff, I want to try that, but not before do an alpha release. I want to get the alpha release first and then come back and iterate and see if KubeBuilder can make things progressively better.
Okay. So I just thought, I think if we completely use KubeBuilder, I think a lot of code will be totally different. That's my
Yeah. I mean, that's
right.
why it's alpha,
Yeah.
and it could change a lot while it's still alpha. Fortunately, the existing code bases are very, very small. And so if KubeBuilder can make them smaller, that's good in my opinion. But if KubeBuilder ends up making them bigger, then I'm not going to do it because there's no point.
Mhm.
You know, a nice small code base is easy to deal with. If it's just a few hundred lines, you know, dealing with a dynamic client and some hand generated functions, it's not a big deal.
Okay.
Cool. Sounds good. Moving on, we have volume expansion.
Hello, Michelle, can you hear me?
Hello. Yep.
Hello. All right. So I saw your comment actually on the that PR actually, and I think we wanted to merge it while until we fix the thing and for entry drivers. Thought there was a concern, like yeah. So I'm not sure if this is blocker for the other PR. What do you think? Or we can talk in the PR actually.
I guess I'm just wondering what is our exit plan for this? Like, if this is just a short-term thing, how are we going to get rid of it?
When we have, I think when we have entry drivers unsupported and when the like all the CSI drivers do this correctly.
I guess how do we know when all of the CSI drivers do it correctly? Like, how do we know when that's done?
So we have to implement the spec wording change, right? Like what we talked about in the last call, last call, where like we are saying that any operation that could potentially result in like pending expansion. So all the CSI drivers, like for example, for snapshot, we covered that when you publish a volume, not publish a volume, we should expand and check the size. We added some wording. We don't have sanity test. I'm not sure any driver is doing that right now. Similar wording and the sanity test has to be added for the expansion also, I think, to cover this edge case. And yeah, so that's like I have to bring this up in the CSI community sync and then
Okay.
propose the
I
word.
guess what I'm worried about is like
Mm.
we put this in, drivers start depending on it. We make the CSI spec change, but then driver authors don't end up doing it because they say the current way is already working for them and there's nothing to fix.
Yeah, we could enforce that by making the CSS sanity test change, I think. That's my plan for that one. Because we had to do that for snapshot behavior also, right? Like right now, we just made like if we rebase or use the latest version of CSS spec in Kubernetes, then basically a bunch of drivers like are non-compliant.
Okay. I guess what I'm just worried about is we're introducing something that we already know that we don't want in the long term, and it's going to be hard to get people to stop depending on it. And like maybe if that's the case, what if we just make this the permanent solution?
So that's the thing, actually. I think the community still has to decide if we are really want all the drivers to, like, I know I have my own thoughts about the whole thing that checking the disk size each time you mount the volume. Like when I talk to XFS engineers, they are like, the geometry of the device is not so readily available as we talked about. Like you can use IOCTLs and you can use some commands that we are doing, some other drivers, some other file system types, if like BTRF, ButterFS or something else, if it doesn't expose the geometry, what then? Like we should, we have to add wording in the spec. So I think this decision is a little bit more like, what to say? Yeah, more
I
discussion in
guess,
the same.
okay, considering that a lot of this like overall design is still very much in flux, would it make sense that we put a feature gate around this since things are still up in the air and subject to change?
Ouch. We could about like that would cover the what are we planning to cover just the expansion behavior or just the just the expansion behavior. You want to put a
I guess like putting the annotation on.
for entry we have already implemented it, so it already sort of it should work. And like for example, if Azure driver implements this offline expansion or like it will already work. But for this, I think it's too late to implement a feature gate actually.
Then I guess like, should we consider that this should be the actual solution and we should go back on the other discussion that we had? Like the thing I'm worried about is like, introducing something that's not feature gated means that it's hard to change the behavior later because people end up depending on it. And especially since we're working with like in-tree and it's like coordinating between in-tree and non-in-tree components, then it gets hard to know how many people out there are actually using this.
Yeah, I hear you. So so when we talk about like I'm just confused. Like what can we do then? We cannot introduce a feature gate. We could deprecate alpha annotation with the supportability like that. Okay, this will be an interim solution, and
Okay, I guess I need to go back and reread the deprecation policy. I thought we had removed. Oh, okay. I guess we still have a clause on alpha annotations, so maybe we're still okay there. But I had thought that they had been moving away from using alpha annotations.
yeah, I thought like alpha annotation will cover us for now. When we can discuss the how to proceed it in CSI.
Okay. I guess then let's go ahead and do this, but we need to like put a release note on it or something saying that this is alpha and subject to be removed in a future release.
Okay, sure. Let's see. Okay, so Kubernetes one, we have to the one that is in Kubernetes is kind of merged, is there? But for CSI driver, so external resizer we can cover it a release note.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, and we can discuss this in some more detail in the CSI community sync. And okay, anyway, apart from that, I have to start work on the other stuff like the allow volume expansion copy and thing. So I will start this
Okay.
week, and that's the plan.
Oh, one more thing on this. Since it's alpha, at least in the resizer, can we put a feature gate around that? The resizer. That way, drivers may not automatically start getting the behavior because in-tree, because the in-tree logic is going to add the alpha annotation no matter what, right?
Yeah.
So then we need something on the resizer side so drivers can opt into it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure. I think that sounds fine.
All right. Cool. Sounds good. Thank you. moving on to our sidecar status. Are there any updates here?
I can start with external provisioner. So I had one other flaky test, or actually the test was correct. It found a flaky implementation where randomness caused volume provisioning to fail under various special circumstances. Immediate binding, allowed topology in the storage class, and you had to have distributed provisioning enabled. So a bit unlikely, but it's still a bug or a missing feature, depending on how you want to look at it. And I have a PR pending. I think Chris looked at it and is now asking Cheng to review or to do an in-depth review of that pending PR.
Yep, I'll take a look today.
Great. Sounds good. Thank you. I think, and Chris, that's the last thing that's remaining before we release the external provisioner.
Yep.
Cool. Sounds good. How are we doing on the other sidecars?
I have released the wooden house.
It's done?
Yeah.
Cool.
I need to update the editor with changelog, and then it's done.
All right.
Yes,
Okay, and then snapshotter we discussed.
Yeah,
There's
we're
a couple
waiting for
PRs
that.
pending.
Waiting for that storage version change.
All right, cool. Resizer, I guess we just sort of discussed it here. There's one PR pending to add behavior to process the new annotation. Let's see, CSI proxy is Jing here. I was talking with Jing, and I think I want to make sure that we update because we're kind of doing this out of cycle, but we should still update the KEP and make sure that all the PRR requirements are met before we release a V1 version. So I spoke with Jing to have her sync up on that. So CSI proxy might not be released with all the other sidecars. It might be a next release kind of thing, but we'll see. And then host path, I think we need to wait until everything else is released so we can update the manifest there. And all the other repos, yeah?
About host path driver, the last two releases, 1.5 and 1.6, they both had code for restoring state after a driver restart, which I think was added for some snapshotter test, I don't know, but both releases have problems when you try to actually use them in the Kubernetes E2E testing, because that code is just plain broken. It just doesn't work properly when there are other CSI drivers in the system, and that blocks us from updating to the existing release of host path in the E2E testing, which which itself is a problem because the old host path driver and deployment files still use the beta APIs. So I'm currently thinking to do a release of the host path driver, a 1.7 release, as soon as we have a fix for the state handling, and not wait for the other sidecars, and then we can do another update later on.
Okay.
The only problem is that
it sounds like it. How big is this fix? Like, should this theoretically be like a bug fix?
It should be a simple bug fix, but I think the person who is making that change has been working on it for 2 weeks now, and he's doing a lot more work than I expected to be necessary. I think I will take a stab at this myself tomorrow, because it really shouldn't be more than half a day of work at most, and a few lines, and just moving a very, very small amount of code. And what he's moving is currently the entire logic of, say, create volume. That just doesn't look right to me.
Okay. Yeah, I think if this can be done as a bug fix, I think that's fine. I guess okay. Anyway, I haven't been following the issue, but I thought in general the host path driver can't really handle restarting because it has all the in-memory caches for everything.
That
So
was
this is for snapshot when we are doing the upgrade test. We have to be able to restart it and be able to create a volume from a snapshot that was created earlier. So, no, something that we need to.
Do you actually run those tests? Because I'm surprised that they pass. Or in which do you
Those
run?
are not. No, we don't really have automatic, but we do have a when we promote snapshot to V1, we do have to do some manual testing to make sure that it works. So yeah, it was at that time we. I can't remember that time. So
But I think we have.
for that.
Doesn't the same problem exist for even like provision volumes? We need to discover the provision volumes after a restart.
Yeah,
I think
the
so.
code
Yeah,
and the code added both. It just did it in a way that is completely unorthodox. It looks at mounted file system and then makes the concludes from that this must have been mounted by the CSI host path driver, which is wrong. It's just a wrong assumption because there might be mounted. Yeah.
Doesn't the driver put everything in its own folder, like
I think it was
folder
not
specific
checking
to
for
that
the.
driver?
I think it's when it was checking the path, it's not really checking like the driver name or something. So it's kind of assumed everything under that path belongs to the same driver. I think
And it
that's
wasn't
the
checking its
problem.
own path. It was checking the pod directory.
I
Basically,
see.
the published volumes, essentially.
I see. I haven't looked at the code, but like how hard do you think it would be to use the
It's
driver specific directory instead of the pod directory?
The solution that I have in mind is to use the structures that we have already for the in-memory representation of what the driver thinks is its state, and then just dumping that entire state into a file in a private directory and restore that afterwards. And then it basically continues running as it did before. And that shouldn't be hard. It's really just defining the struct, making sure that all code that manipulates the internal structures go through that code that dumps the current state into that file so that the driver can be killed at any time. And that's it. It really shouldn't be hard. But as I said, I probably didn't communicate that idea well enough or whatever. But now we've ended up with a different PR that works differently. And moves around a lot more code than I expected. It really should be just the state handling that is in a package, and then the rest just adds and removes entries from the internal state after it has done its other work, and that's it. It really shouldn't be much code. It's of course not a quality implementation. A quality CSI driver would then need to take care of rediscovering state, making sure that this state is saved reliably, even if a disk crashes and so on, and all of that. But for the CSI host path driver, we just need something that works and is as simple as possible.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. All right. So I think that's fine. I think anyway, the host path driver is generally the last one that we release after everything else. So in terms of timing, that's fine. All right, and then for all the other repos, I think we don't need any releases. Are there? I have seen some PRs in CSI test. Is there enough to do a release there?
I haven't checked, to be honest. And it's
Okay.
I would argue the CSI test is not tied to our normal release cycle. We can basically do a release whenever we feel it's useful. A more interesting question is what we do with the mock driver in CSI test for the next release. My colleague is almost done with getting rid of the Kubernetes dependency on CSI test. So question is when we can deprecate or how we deprecate this mock driver. If no one is using it anymore, do we still need to keep the code around, or what do we do with it?
I would say once we can switch the Kubernetes tests to use host path instead of mock, and we have sort of shown that the host path driver can replace the mock driver in our tests, then I think that would be then we can go ahead and deprecate the mock driver.
And we do that by declaring it deprecated and then after some time removing the source code, or how?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just say declare it as deprecated in the next release, and then we can remove the code once
Okay.
we know it's completely replaceable.
Yeah. Good. Then this is actually another argument to do a feature release of the host path driver in advance once it's ready, because then we can use that updated release in the mock testing in Kubernetes.
Yep.
And then
Sounds good.
declare CSI test as deprecated, because right now PR against Kubernetes would have to use the canary image of host path driver, which clearly can't be reached as is.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sounds good to me. All right, any other topics? All right, then we will end for today. Thanks.
Thank you.